Morning, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. If I could have your attention here, we're going to get started now. And for those of you standing, we're bringing out some more chairs in just a moment here. So thank you for your patience. Welcome to the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. My name is Joe Lopez, and I have the honor of serving as the acting president and CEO of the Richard Nixon Foundation. Thank you all for being here. We're here today to discuss and confront one of the most urgent challenges facing the United States: the devastating toll of fentanyl and drugs on our families, our communities, and on our country. It's a crisis that demands leadership at all levels, and it's fitting that we're having this conversation here at the Nixon Library because more than 50 years ago, President Nixon faced a similar crisis and responded in ways that remain instructive to us today. In the late 1960s and early 70s, drug abuse and addiction became a significant problem in our country. Overdoses were climbing, crime was rising, and servicemen from Vietnam were returning home addicted to heroin. President Nixon saw this problem and he acted. He saw this as an issue that could not be solved with just enforcement alone. He pursued a balanced strategy. He invested, his administration and the federal government invested in treatment and rehabilitation on one hand, while strengthening law enforcement to disrupt supply on the other. He reorganized the federal government to make drug enforcement more effective. Under his administration, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, was created in 1973. At the same time, the Nixon administration dramatically expanded access to treatment, funding for new community-based programs, and requiring veterans hospitals to provide care for those struggling with addiction. In 1971, he said of this problem, quote, "It is a problem which demands compassion and not simply condemnation." That kind of vision, practical, compassionate, and comprehensive, provides lessons for us today as we face this fentanyl and opioid crisis in our country, a crisis that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives in just the past 5 years alone. So as we host this program, our purpose is not only to examine today's problem, but to also draw inspiration from the past. And we're thrilled that after this panel here today, that our Orange County Sheriff, Don Barnes, is going to join us for a keynote address. But before that, I'm pleased to welcome our very distinguished panel of experts in addiction, intervention, and human trafficking. And to lead our panel today, I'm very pleased to introduce my friend, Maureen Nunn. Maureen is a teacher, author, television host, who has devoted much of her career to helping individuals and families through her work in drug and alcohol rehabilitation. She also brings a personal connection to the Nixon Library. As the daughter of Helene and Jack Drown, close friends of President Nixon and First Lady Pat Nixon for many, many years. Maureen has long shared her firsthand knowledge of the Nixon story and the Nixon family with many guests and visitors here at the Nixon Library, especially in programs honoring First Lady Pat Nixon. She has been our featured speaker for Pat Nixon's birthday over many, many years. Today, she continues her commitment and connection as a member of the board of directors of the Nixon Foundation, and it's my honor to welcome her to the stage today, Maureen Nunn.
Thank you for that incredible introduction. I don't know how worthy I am of it, but I'll try. Anyway, thank you so much for coming here today to the President Nixon Library. It's just an honor and a privilege for me to be here with you. So warm and welcoming. I hope you all have a place to sit in the back. Again, thank you so much for coming. I'd really like to give special thanks to Joe Lopez, who's the executive director of the Nixon Library. And to Chris Nordijk, I don't know where Chris is. Is he here? Can you just, good, there he is in the back of the room. He's the Vice President of External Affairs at the library. And let me tell you that without the two of them, guess what? Nobody would be here, I wouldn't be standing here, and we wouldn't have this incredible symposium. So I'd like to give them a huge, huge, huge hand, and their staffs as well. Bravo. Thank you so much. There's a ton of information today. So much, and we are so blessed to have three panelists who will actually share the problems, the solutions, and give us this glimmer of hope as well. The title of the conference is really long. I don't know whether AI got tired. Anyway, too much stuff. So we have, it's called The Policy with Purpose, as you can read there. President Nixon's Drug Strategy in a 21st Century Context, Facts from the Front Lines, and then Treatment Triumphs. So as Joe said, President Nixon really cared so much about drugs, and he formed the agencies to try to help people recover and set up people who were in the field. Today we're going to talk about those huge crises, one of alcohol substance abuse, and the other one is human trafficking. You have the statistics in front of you today. We didn't want to put them up on the board because there are so many of them, but when you get a chance to read them, they are staggering. 3 million people a year are victims of substance use, and they impact millions and millions of people's lives every single year. 27 million people are rescued from human trafficking and child prostitution. And it's sick to say that the revenue from this, if you could even take a high guess, $236 billion, I repeat, $236 billion. It's a sick, sick business. But I think that Ed Storty told me too that when we were talking before this all started, this has been going on for hundreds of years. Addiction it hasn't been something that would just evolve like a couple of years ago. It's been going on for hundreds of years. So, as we know, lives are recovered and people do heal. So that's what we're here for today. These wonderful panelists are here, as I said, to share their solutions to the problems and then also offering that life-saving hope, which is incredible. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce the panelists. They are Bill Woodbury, raise your hand. Once a school teacher, always a school teacher. Jim Morrow and Ed Storty. So each of them brings experience and insight, and most importantly, hope. So let's get started. Bill Woodbury and your wife, Linda, wrote a book called Enablism. Hope you can see it. Where's my microphone? It's like, okay. This is for sale, and Bill will tell you how to get it. It's a must-read book, and Bill is a certified drug and alcohol counselor. You have spent 40 years helping other people in the field of addiction.
Pretty close.
You must have started when you were 10. Okay.
I'm pickled.
You're pickled. And you're here today to talk about the family's silent battle. What it's like really to have a child who's caught in addiction and then wait for that moment when they ask for help. So welcome.
Yeah.
This is really,
Thank
really
you.
great. Okay, so let's start. How were you and your wife inspired to write this book? It's not a really big book. You could read it in about, I would say, maybe a couple of hours, and it's just absolutely a must read. How did you get inspired to do this?
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I got the thought, the insight to look at the addiction side. I was a frontline counselor, a program director at a drug and alcohol program, and I kept seeing more and more younger people coming in, more and more overdoses. This was during the time of the opiate addiction, the pre-fentanyl, I should say, and I kept seeing more and more addicted younger people. The big pharma was producing more and more drugs and giving them to the parents were giving them to the kids, they could get them from doctors. It was so bad, in addition to the marijuana cards that were popular at the time. You know, they go in and have a headache and get a marijuana card. So it was getting very, very out of control. Plus, alcohol was getting so out of control that I started speaking on it and talking about it and stumbled onto the word enablism. And it is the other side of the coin of addiction. The family gets dependent upon rescuing. They start off controlling and they end up, they start off caring and they end up controlling. Somewhere along the line, it becomes like a substance addiction. And it's hard for the family to stop, but that's why we wrote the book. We wrote it for the family. We geared it down. We took all the experience that my wife is an early educator, and all the years I worked as a frontliner, and tried to write it to the parents, not to therapists, not to PhDs, but to the parents. Mm-hmm.
Can you define enablism?
Oh, it is hard. It is the other side of the coin. The ism is like alcoholism. It is like workaholism. You know, there's a lot of isms. And in the recovering community, we call it the ISM, I, self, me. I, self, me. So enabling starts off, in most cases, to help. They care, they love, they want to give back. It's a word alternative to the word codependent, which kind of got to be finger wagging. And, you know, you're codependent. So we use overcompensating along with enablism. And they do it so long that they either become codependent to soothe themselves, they become enabling to make themselves feel better, I, self, me, or they wall off. They're both sides of enablism. They're a self-preservation is how it turns out. So it's the other side of the coin from addiction. It's about self-preservation. It ceases to be about the other person. That takes a while to realize and to talk about. So that's the definition or so of enablism.
Well, you go into detail in the book
Mm-hmm.
about how a family really can help that child who's caught in addiction and then wait for that moment when they decide to ask for help.
Yeah.
So that can be a long journey.
It sometimes can be.
So what advice would you give to the parents if a loved one or a family member were actually waiting for that moment when they wanted to get help? What should those parents be doing?
Well, a lot of the work that the parents can do is to get involved with community-based support. There's a lot of it out there. Al-Anon is one. There's Nar-Anon for people that are more addicted to chemicals, heroin, different things that started. There's a lot of help available. There's a lot of research, a lot of written information. Enablism helps. The boundaries need to be set, and boundaries need to have a gate. So even though the boundaries have to be locked for a while for the person with addiction, when treatment is available, they can go into treatment. Now, you may keep the gate locked, you may unlock it, but you always keep your key, parents, loved ones, wives, husbands. You never give them the control. And you learn more about the disease yourself, you learn about enablism, you learn about self, and that tends to help more than rescuing, fixing. I jokingly in the book talk about a mattress, and the family runs around throwing a mattress out so the loved one hits the mattress instead of hits the pavement. That's enabling behavior. Eventually you have to pull the mattress away, or you become dependent upon the mattress and you go out and buy a double. You buy a box spring to go with your mattress. So you become enablism and you become addicted to rescuing.
So taking maybe a comment from a parent who has a child or a loved one caught up in addiction, what are some of the worst things the parents can say or do? You've mentioned a few, but what are some of the things if the child said, you know, I don't have a problem, you can't make me,
Yeah.
it's your problem, and I'm just gonna do what I want, and if you're gonna set those rules and regulations, I'm not gonna be here, I'm gonna run away.
Yeah, and it's hard if they're under 18, if they're under your roof and they're under your control. It's very difficult. You have some leverage, but it's hard because you can't, an older adult, a young adult in their late teens, early 20s, 30s, 40s, you can ask them to leave if they won't follow the rules. It's harder with an adolescent. So you have to have meetings, you have to set boundaries, and you have to be consistent. There's a trust that you have to work on, but you also need to verify. You need to sometimes have drug tests that they submit to. Phones are dangerous if they're young people. There is after the middle school, the 7th or 8th grade, maybe they can have a phone, but before that, you need to be very careful with the phones, even after that. But have access to their phone, be able to watch them when they're underage. It is hard, it's very hard, very frustrating. The more support you can get for the parents, then they don't slip into the addiction, they become young adults worse.
Because there are some comments that I've heard too, from the person who has addictions, and they're really not in their right mind.
Yeah.
And they say things like, leave me alone. It's my problem, it's not yours.
Well, it is a family systems issue.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's a family systems issue.
So how would you respond to that then if your child or your loved one says, leave me alone, it's not your problem, and then they isolate in their room?
Now, if they're over the age of consent, if a lot of times there's a backlash of younger people moving back in homes, if they're in their late teens, 20s, or older, I've been on the phone talking to parents and they say, my son is addicted, and I ask, I'm thinking they're 25, they're 45, and they're still addicted and locked in their room. There's boundaries. You can, if they're over a certain age, ask them to leave. They don't contribute in most cases. The more help the family gets, the less enabled they become. Now, they may swing over and throw them out. It's only for a season. If they get help, then you can, that's why boundaries have a gate. It is hard. You have to sometimes do an intervention. You have to open the door to them to leave or get treatment. And if they don't act on that treatment, if they don't get help, then you have consequences. You stop paying their insurance, you stop paying their rent. Well, they'll hit the streets, they'll be on the streets. They could die of an overdose. Well, they could die under your roof too.
Good one. I was just gonna ask that question. What would you tell the parents about really setting limits and boundaries? And then the fear factor is, you just addressed it. Oh my gosh, what if they're out there on the street and they die and then it's my fault because I kicked them out?
Well, the more help you get, parents, loved ones, the less likely you are to believe that power. You don't have the power to stop them. You didn't cause it. You can't cure it. The more ism that you become, the more self-sacrificing that you give, the better you feel in the moment, the worse you feel in the long run. It's better to feel uncomfortable in the moment and set the boundaries, and then in the long run feel better. That's hard for parents that have flipped over from caring to controlling. They'd rather soothe in the beginning than soothe later. But when they say things like that, you stay quiet and you keep your boundary, and that means they may have to hit the streets. But you pulled the mattress, so guess where they're gonna go? They're gonna hit the pavement. And chances are they're gonna go get help. They're resilient people. I was a resilient person in my addiction. I survived the streets. They can survive. They're a lot tougher. I used to call my mother and whine, and she would say, goodbye. So I survived. And I got help.
And you're a living testimony.
Yeah, many, many years later. But had I been enabled, I might not have been here.
You mentioned cause, cure, and control. You didn't cause it, can't control it,
Right.
can't cure it. So could you give a little bit of elaborate a little bit on those three things.
Oh, sure. I mean, that comes from Al-Anon. If there's anybody that has attended Al-Anon or should, if they haven't, that's one of the mottos that they say. And it relieves the guilt, it relieves the needless guilt, the soothing, I call it, that I'd rather fix it in the beginning than fix it in the long run. You didn't cause it, parents, mom, dad, no matter how it was, they're the ones that got addicted. They're the ones that have to deal with the consequences. Now, you are affected by it. It's a family illness. The sicker they got, the sicker you got, the other side of the coin. The more enablism, the more they became alcoholism, it gets worse. It always gets worse until you get help. So you didn't cause it, you can't cure it, you can't fix it. You can only support it. And there's plenty of help, but you sometimes have to be the catalyst to get the help first. And the byproduct is they get the help, or you get better and they don't get the help. It's not your job, you can't fix it.
Will you talk a little about your personal journey? You were on the street, you called your mom, she said bye. Tell us about your specific personal journey.
Yeah, there was a long history. I was a musician. I retired in 2020 from playing the drums. And I was up in LA in the 70s and got more and more involved and crazier, and just was fully involved in the community, the crazy town of Hollywood in the early 80s. And I would call my mother every now and then. At that point, I was so good at never asking for money, but saying that my car was having trouble, that she would write me a check. My car wasn't having trouble. I was needing more drugs. And eventually she got wise to that, and that's when she started hanging up. And that's when I left Hollywood, came back to Long Beach, and ended up on couch surfing, ended up, dead-end jobs, paying rooms, all that kind of stuff, until I went and got help in 1987. And I've been sober ever since. I've stayed clean and sober ever since. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. And I try to tell people that. It's slow briety, I tell people.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's slow briety, people. But it is important to stay the course, and you will get what the promises in Alcoholics Anonymous say, but they don't always come easy. They come a long time.
Thank you for that, yes. So what part does faith and belief in a higher power actually is involved in recovery?
For me, a great deal. I was in the hospital and had a very deep experience that kind of led me on a faith journey all these years. And I did a little look-see into the founders of the Alcoholics Anonymous organization, and one of them was in New York. He said to the one that is in Ohio, "How come you have a better rate of recovery than I do in New York?" And he says it's because of spirituality. He came from mainline religion. He did what he could to get the person involved, to get a deep spiritual experience. The idea behind it is a spiritual journey. The more spiritual you are, the better off you are. I ask people when they come in, how are you doing with God? How is your faith journey when they, if they relapse? And 10 times out of 10, they tell me not too good. So the main reason for relapse is they haven't grown spiritually. They've stayed this big, and the rest of their life got bigger, and eventually they fell. So the higher the spirituality is, the better off you are. And there are paths, I think you need to investigate. You need to settle on one and go forward, make the decision and go forward.
Good one, good, yes.
Yeah.
So talk about the families that have children at highest risk for getting involved in drugs and alcohol. What are some of the...
It is so hard to pin it, Sometimes they are, they come from good families, everything is fine, and it's more of a genetic issue passed on through the generations, so there is a genetic component to it that's debatable, but seems to be true. So there is that. There's others that experiment, and if you experiment long enough, you get addicted. There's the classics. There's broken homes. There's a history of addiction in the family, generation after generation, so it's multi-generational. There's lots of different reasons. There's pressure. Middle school is still a big one. There's a lot of pressure to fit in and to experiment and to try it. And now with marijuana being legal and alcohol being a worse problem than ever, it's easier for the kids to experiment and use. And about 10% of them do get addicted. And they come from all backgrounds, all walks of life. You know, there's the traditional and there's the non-traditional. But it's fixable if you look at the family unit. The more people that are involved, the better off it gets.
Yes, and you've talked about the families. There's a real investment. Family members really getting involved and not just saying, oh, this will go away, he'll outgrow it. You know, it's just, he's experimenting. But you've talked so well about this whole family investment plan.
Oh, it really is. And a lot of times the parents will say to me, well, I let them drink a little in the basement, they'd have fun. And I'd say, well, aren't they using other things? Oh, no, I don't allow that. How do you know? And you talk to the person that's in treatment, the identified, the patient, and they tell you they were down there smoking pot, they were trying cocaine, they were doing different things. The parents didn't know it. So being that enablism, that enabler to go along to get along, makes it very, very bad. Some parents drink with the kids. Some get high with the kids. We have a great deal of people, I call them second generation kids of hippies, and they come in being raised with it. So they don't think anything's wrong with it.
Unbelievable. Well, thank you so much, Bill. And also, your book is available?
Yeah, it's available on enablism, one word, .com.
Enablism.com.
Yeah.
And really, it's a must read. And you're working on a second book.
Yeah, that book is being expanded. I had some surgery problems this year, so probably toward the end of next year it'll be finished.
Great. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
It's a big, big, big problem, but we've heard about some specific takeaway solutions, not just rhetoric out here about, oh, well, we have this and this statistic and here is that and everything else, but he's given us some really, really useful takeaways and solutions.
Yeah.
All right, our next guest is Jim Morrow. Jim Morrow is raise your hand. Don't you love his tie? All of their ties are really nice. Okay, back to business here. Jim is a certified drug and alcohol counselor, and he was responsible and instrumental in the rescue effort of child prostitutes and human trafficking. So he worked with the Children of the Night in rescuing child prostitutes and human trafficking because they were destroying not only families, but entire communities. So Jim is here today to talk about that. But before we start, he was nice enough to bring us a video of this Los Angeles-based organization called Children of the Night with the acclaimed president or the founder, Lois Lee, and they've had between 80 and 90% success rate of rescuing child prostitutes and human trafficking. And we'll hear about Jim's incredible role in how many lives that he saved by actually being right there on the streets with them. Okay, so here's the video. Let's take a look at the screen.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lois Lee. I'm the founder and the president of Children of the Night. The Children of the Night team stays with our prostituted youth all the way, from life with a pimp to college and a family. We no longer sit behind a desk and wait for prostituted youth to find us. We go where our children need us. And if necessary, we accompany them to government offices for services. No rules, no waiting list, no expectations. We have accomplished psychotherapists, doctors, dentists, and other professionals who help us. We have opened our private test center for the high school equivalency exam. Our tutoring program has been so successful, we've gone global to reach young sex trafficking victims in developing countries. Our new programs have increased our clients by 90%. And our success rate continues to be 70 to 80% of permanent removal from prostitution. With your help and support, we remain strong.
So she is very, very acclaimed, and she's internationally successful in the wonderful work that she does. She founded this organization called Children of the Night. And we're here to hear how Jim did absolute life-changing work, was on the streets, traveled all over the world. So he will share his story with you today and talk about child prostitution and human trafficking. Jim, it's just a delight to have you here today. How in the world did you get involved with Children of the Night?
Is this working?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, if you-
I think it is, yeah.
Good.
I was a student at Dominguez Hill State College, and she was doing a lecture on prostitution, child prostitution, and I went up to her after she spoke and said, I'm very interested in becoming a volunteer. And she said, well, you're gonna have to be vetted. We're gonna do a complete history on you, especially because you're a male. And I said, fine. So I remember going up for the first training. This was back in 1984, 1985. And it was an experience. She was very specific about what she wanted you to do to work with these kids. Because a lot of people get involved in this particular trafficking business because they don't have boundaries, honestly. Some of them don't. And we used to have an expression called petunia hoppers, where the kids would go places and they'd running away from their pimp, and they would end up in one of these houses and they'd run havoc in the house, most of them. And they would try to get back, unfortunately, with the pimp. So I hope that answers part of your question.
Okay, well, that tells us how you got specifically involved, that you heard her speak and then you wanted to
Yeah, I heard her speak, and I went up there, and she was, I think, she put me to work the first night.
She put you to work the first night.
Yeah, I was a little scared, shocked. I wasn't quite ready for that. I said, well, can't you go out there with me? She said, no, you're gonna have to be on your own.
Okay, this is called baptism by fire.
Absolutely.
I know. You got shot, held up on the first night. Where did this occur? Where, because it's a Los Angeles-based organization, so I'm naming some streets. What, Hollywood Boulevard? I don't know.
Well, you want me to tell you the streets?
The streets, I know many streets.
We call them the Stroll or the Blade. And child prostitution is rampant in Los Angeles County, Orange County. The things where you see it most nowadays are on Figueroa, Sepulveda up north in Van Nuys, Long Beach Boulevard. There's 4 or 5 different places. The gang members that are with these kids or the pimps take them to different places when it gets a little bit hot, when vice goes out and starts wrapping people up.
So, okay, take us back to the first night on this street. What were you wearing? What were you carrying? What were you saying? How did you identify a child prostitute?
I remember Lois telling me that you sort of look like a trick.
Okay, for those of, this is really hard language, but we've heard the word pimp and we've heard the word trick. So would you tell us what a trick is?
A customer.
A hustler.
Average, when I first got involved in it, my middle 40s, I had that kind of look, married. So what we do is we would drive up to a certain distance, and there'd be maybe 4, 5, 6 girls on a corner working, and the pimps would stay back, especially up on Hollywood Boulevard. Most of them used to stay in where the Lucky's parking lot used to be on Sunset Boulevard. I would walk up to them and say, "Hi, I'm Jim Morrow, I'm from Show of the Night. If you guys ever decide you want to get off the street or make a change in your life, give us a call." And it was very simple. I had to really be looking around to make sure that there were not any, especially with gang members, because they're pimps, not so much. They didn't affect me, but working with, when it got to be really bad, especially during, we had to wear flak jackets.
You had to wear what?
A flak jacket, you know what I mean?
Oh, the flat jacks. Sorry, thank you.
That was during the time that when we had the riots and stuff here. So it was a little nerve-wracking. I never thought about it that way. I just thought, well, I'm doing what I'm doing, and I never thought much about the danger. We went to many, I've been to almost every city in the Western United States, especially, and Canada, London, Honolulu, but a lot of the times we've gone up San Francisco, Oakland, coming down to Portland, back, of course, to Los Angeles, San Diego, over to Albuquerque, back to New York, and then up to Montreal, because that's where the pimps take the girls to, where they know there's going to be customers. It's a billion-dollar business.
Right, it's just huge. We talk, yes, billion-dollar business. That's sick figures, really, S-I-C-K, sick figures, really bad. So you wore a flat vest, like to protect yourself, but did you hand out any, like, reading material, any cards?
No, what we have is a little card that says, if you want to leave your pimp, give us a call. Very simple, it's small, that they can hide it if their pimp, because if the pimp sees it, they're going to get in trouble.
Pimp season.
You know,
What is a pimp?
no, I said if the pimp sees the card,
Oh, sorry.
they would, it would be very bad for the young girl that's working.
Okay. So take us then from the time the child is trafficked to their rescue and then their release. Take us through that.
Okay. It starts out, I think we should start out really, most of these kids are foster kids, or they come from drug addicted, heroin addicts, from families that they would rather not live at home. There was sexual abuse going on, so they were easily trafficked by what the pimps call he's a catcher. And he's a young guy, goes around to some of the schools or some of the foster homes and endears himself with the kids. And they groom them to set them up to get involved in prostitution. Or what I think it really is statutory rape, because kids are the ages from 11 to 17. So prostitution is not a really good word. These are just kids that are being abused by everyone around them. And when they get on the street, one of the things, I could keep talking just.
No, you
One of the most important things I think too is that there's most of the men who are searching out these girls are married. A good percentage of them. And I've seen people from all walks of life. Unfortunately, I've seen some people in the religious business. You know, you'd see a cross on the back of their car. I've seen all kinds of different definitions of what a trick or a customer really is. They are very seldom arrested. What happens is the girls are arrested and they put them in juvenile hall. And they call it, like I said, child prostitution. But if you've got a male who's 20 to 25, 30 years old, who's having relationships with a girl that's underage, that's statutory rape. And it always has been. And I'm surprised that people don't realize no, well, they say, well, she's just a prostitute, you know, but they have no concept of what goes on in these young people's lives. So, you know, I'm just a train of thought sometimes.
Jim, it's fine. Your information is absolutely stellar because you were there personally on the street rescuing them. You traveled all over the world to do this. Mm-hmm. You spent, I don't know, the majority part of your life, and also your wife who is here today, your beautiful wife, Meg, is here today, who went with you. And that's got to be really...
A couple of times.
A couple of times, right.
Only not on the street. I would never take her there, but
right.
She's gone on trips with me, yeah, where we were. I also did a lot of speaking engagements for Children of the Night, so my time was spent doing that mostly, and training some new people that came into the program. Unfortunately, it's not, once you've done that and worked on the streets like that in all these different cities, I'm surprised that I did not get more cynical because of what I've seen. And unfortunately now we're seeing an increase in statutory rape or child prostitution, whatever you want to call it. It's not a real big topic because, you know, there's a lot of things going on in our country, but it's still there. It's worse than ever. And there aren't very many organizations like Children of the Night or other programs that specifically work with this population. I don't know if you saw it on the tape, the services that Lois provides. When I retired from them, it was very hard for me because I'd been so used to. But I look back at it now and I thought, I could have got myself in trouble out on the street.
Exactly.
We used to have what they call a trick line, where there would be maybe 100 cars and 10 or 12 girls on a corner, especially in Phoenix on 27th Street. And I just walked by them to go up and talk to some of the gals. And it just amazed me what I would be looking at. I going, how could all these people be in?
Yeah.
How do they get out of the house? You can't work late all the time.
So a question for all of us, because you have given us the problem. Now we want some solutions. So we're all sitting here today. What in the world can we do? What are some of the signs that we see that would actually send a red flag? Wow, that is human trafficking. So what can we all do? Call to action. What can we do? Is there a phone number to call? Is there information? How can we all, there's more than 100 people here. How can we all get involved?
Well, I think it's really important to realize that there's there's a lot of help out there. Children of the Night is one of the few organizations that works with this population. As far as solutions go, I think it's a little different than these two wonderful gentlemen talked about, because it's gotten worse, not better. And because there's just not enough, you know, you hear sometimes people say, well, we should legalize prostitution in the United States. It'll never happen. It'll never happen. And what you have is a bunch of young people who are much like veterans that come back from war. Their PTSD is so prominent that many of them, even after they get away from their pimp, start using again. You know, they'd use light drugs like marijuana and stuff like that in the beginning, but it got worse and worse and worse because they couldn't deal with the pain. You had to make a certain amount of money to give your pimp. And if he said, there's an expression called the bottom bitch, and she's the one that goes out with the girls and makes sure they make their money. Even if there's crazies, they used to call them crazies, the guys that were dangerous. You know, they're putting themselves at risk every time they're out there. And honestly, it's a scary situation because I believe statistically over 5,000 kids have died over the years. You know, recently you saw that picture where the guy, the Tesla with the 15-year-old girl was in the trunk. I'm sure you saw it on the news. What do you think that was? That's trafficking. Why was somebody interested in a 15 or 13-year-old girl from Lake Elsinore, other than the fact that she'd been groomed, I think. We'll find out more stuff, but something happened there's a lot more to that story.
Yes, well, it's just huge, as you said, it's international. So what are the biggest countries that are involved in trafficking? And then a follow-up question is, what are the signs that we can see if somebody's being trafficked? So first of all, what are the countries that are, you mentioned, unfortunately, Los Angeles, Orange County. I think in one of the discussions I had with you, and you asked me to guess where the most trafficking and prostitution was, and you said the Disneyland Hotel.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
On Wall Street, Anaheim was one of the big areas, Those things, it's changed. Now they have a corridor in LA County.
They do,
on
okay,
Figueroa.
great.
You've probably seen some television programs where they've talked about that also. That's one of the biggest areas where we see kids. It's $1 billion business. I think I may have mentioned that. It's huge. And I would think we have probably one of the biggest problems with statutory rape. That's what I think I need to call it, because of the size of our country. Canada has a huge problem. There are areas in Vancouver where police don't even, as long as you stay in this area, I was up there in the winter, and there must have been 80 to 100 girls working.
So Jim, the question is, okay, what are the signals, what are the signs that we can see when somebody's being trafficked?
As far as this population, I would say, well, real specifically, if you see a bunch of young women dressed provocatively, what do they do? Carrying these little purses that they have. They don't carry much in them. And they're eyeing guys as they drive down the street. They'll follow they think everybody's a trick. So even when I was there with my partners, they'd look at me and go, and I go, well, no, that's not what I'm here for. But I think it's really important to know that if you've seen on the television the outfits that these young women are wearing, they're told, they don't get stopped by police, unfortunately. We've done I did a lot of work with different vice departments, and I never met so many wonderful people in my life, especially in Las Vegas and Phoenix. They were just so kind, and they were very kind to the girls. They seemed to understand. A lot of them said they couldn't stay in that end of the business very long because it's so hard on them to see what they see. But they also protected us at times. They'd have a driver that would go by where we were working. So it was kind of a good interchange for us.
You also mentioned in one of the talks that I've had with you, when you check into a hotel, usually we carry a bag and a purse, some kind of luggage or something. And you were mentioning that if you see somebody, an older person, checking into a hotel with a person who has nothing, and they're kind of like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, that could be one of the signs.
Sure.
And then you also mentioned too, I don't know, you could maybe raise your hand and we could see if you've taken an airplane flight recently and gone to the bathroom. On the back of the door, there's a poster saying if you're, good, okay, I see one hand up. We need to get, good. I see a lot of hands up here too. So in the back of the door and also in the restrooms, it's now a really, really incredibly urgent cry to do something. As Jim said, do something, say something. Contact the Children of the Night. See how you can be involved. They're right here in Los Angeles, and they do incredible work. So Jim, thank you so much. Really, thank you very much for all your hard work. I'm sure glad that you did not get killed on that first night. That would have ended our entire...
I think to be between these two men is such an honor.
Oh, that's so nice.
I've known them for years. We all worked at the same organization for a while, and it's just, when I knew that they were going to be here, I go, oh my God, how am I going to do this?
Well, thank you for that, because also, I was thinking about the three of you. These are three living legends. As you can see, they're not old enough to be legends. But I was kind of doing the math, and Bill's been involved for 40 years. Jim has been involved for 60 years. Ed's been involved, well, he started when he was 3. He was still in diapers, no. Anyway, he started when he was really young. So the combination of all three of them is 150 years that they have donated and dedicated their lives to doing life-serving and life-saving work. So let's give them a really big hand. And also I want to mention to you that Ed and Jim and Bill are available for speaking in any of your organizations. On your resource pages here, their telephone numbers are there, so if you want to contact them there. He said he was available for phone calls, and Jim is available for counseling and for speaking, and Bill is also. So in your organizations, maybe you have, I don't know what organizations you have, church groups, school groups, even starting down with Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, any of those organizations to really hear about substance use and human trafficking. So, Ed, you've waited a long time. Thank you very much. I want to thank you especially for your help to me on this symposium. It really means a lot. Thank you so much. So Ed Story is, let's see if I can get this out right. You are an international interventionist specialist. You developed the Story model for intervention. You're going to talk to us today about motivational interviewing to have a person actually be able to find that moment of clarity, that spiritual awakening before tragedy strikes. A mouthful.
Beautifully said.
So thank you so much. How did you get involved in actually founding this Story model of intervention? Well, first of all, let's back up. What's an interventionist?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for you all being here. Thank you for taking the time. To the staff here, you're elegant, and I thank you. I really absolutely thank your kindness. And to Chris and to Joe and to Maureen, thank you.
Thank you for
a lot
being
of time has been put into this, and you've made it for us by attending, so thank you. Well, let me go back. I mean, if I start to talk a little bit about the intervention process, it would really start in my own recovery in 1975. And prior to that, I was working at a settlement house, and that was in diversion work in San Pedro, California. And in that work, I would notice going to homes, trying to help youth out. And if I met with the youth themselves in their home, well, they'd say to me, I'm not going to do anything. You know, you must be crazy to go get help for other things. But if I had a parent there, rarely two parents, but if a parent or a guardian of some sort, they would be someone that I could talk to in the conversation to present, to make it sound like it sounded right, you know, as far as what to do in the future. So with that experience, I start to work at a hospital through my recovery, and I was blessed to have the right person guide me to this facility. And with that, one day a person comes to me. I was 6 months into that position, and he comes to me and he said, would you ever come to my home? My daughter's about 32 years of age. She was in Palos Verdes, California, and my wife and I are going to Green Hills Cemetery to buy a plot because we really believe she'll die any day. And I was just taken back by it. And he said, would you come to the home and just go there and talk to her? And I said, I don't know if I can do that because that's going into a home and it's not here at the hospital. So I went to my colleagues and I asked them, and they said, no, you don't go to her home. She should come to you. She should have the desire herself. And I said, okay. So I went back to him, and he started crying. He just wept. He just cried, and I felt terrible. And I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll come over on a Sunday, and it's my time, and I'll do my best, and that you folks can be there, meaning he and his wife. He said, oh, no, we wouldn't go there. And, I'm thinking, thanks. So he said, no, we can't show up for that. So bottom line was I, at 8 p.m., was driving to the home on the peninsula of the Palos Verdes area, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have the words about the disease of addiction. I didn't know. I didn't know about sincere delusion, that the person is sincere, but they're deluded. I didn't know about most people don't think it's that bad until there's death or harm. I just didn't know it. I knew about me. And so ultimately, I knocked on the door. I mean, shaking. And I'll tell you, when you test your faith, it means everything. Faith. If I didn't have faith, I wouldn't be up here. I wouldn't come up. But reality is, for those that you accept, our God is there for us. And so going and knocking on that door, I said, my name's Ed Storty. And then she said, what do you want? I said, your dad asked me to be able to present to you a solution for your addiction. She said, oh my God. Oh, why? She says, you have 5 minutes and get out. And I don't know where this came from, but I said, I'll take 4 minutes. That's not a problem. And we talked for 45 minutes. And with that, she said, I'll go. And I said, really? I said that. I said, oh my, it's Sunday night. And she goes, I know it's Sunday night. I said, well, I'll have to call the hospital and what? She goes, well, don't talk me out of it now. And so that was my first case. And from there, I traveled internationally, walking in with groups of people to present a solution, whether it would be therapist, outpatient, or residential. But it was based on that there's a tragedy ahead. There is a crisis ahead, and before we lose you, we are going to give you a moment of honoring you, and we will honor you with this gift. And why you and not your neighbor, I don't know, but you've been picked.
Wow, that is incredible. I love the fact that you said, I went out in faith because I couldn't do it without my belief in God.
That's right.
And then you met with her. She said, I'll give you 4 minutes. And 45 minutes later, so you're not the only one there in the intervention when you walked into her home. You had a group of her friends there?
No. So in this particular case, I went by myself.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, and then please understand, for many years, in doing cases, who taught me how to intervene is you. The public did. Books didn't teach me. When I would read a book, I couldn't understand the psychological issue to it. It wasn't my words. Sometimes you can't be what you're not. I mean, I'm not a person to say, well, psychologically, here's what's going on with you. I would rather stay within the realm of, we'll speak to your heart, not to your mind. And what I found is I needed more people to walk in with me to validate the presence of a stranger. So typical cases for me over the years was usually 5 to 20 people that would walk in and present to that person. And as one gentleman stated in intervention, that he said, I'm not going into treatment, so I really am not going to go. And it was a rancher. And he said, you all can be able to have some drinks with me, and I'm not putting down this process, but if I would have gone into treatment, I would have gone for my wife, who passed away 2 years ago. I didn't go for her, so I'm not going today. And there's a gentleman that was in the intervention, and he looked at his friend and said, I'm saddened that you're not going to go because this is your choice. We can't force you, but this is a sad day for me because I'm going to go home to my wife and tell her where I was at today because I'm proud of it. But I wish this would have been available for she and I to have intervened on our son who died 2 years ago
Oh, gosh.
from cocaine addiction.
Oh.
And he said, we'll cry together this afternoon. So what happened in that case is that 2 weeks later, the gentleman we were intervening on passed away. And the call came to me, and he said, you know, Ed, I'd like you to know that he did pass away, but someone did get up in the service and talked brilliantly about meeting with the identified patient, the person we were intervening on, and he said, I'm glad I was there, because we did a living eulogy that day, and that was beautifully said. So intervening really is around, you plan for the person to go to treatment whether they want to or not. They can go in to gain their desire to want continuum of care. But the bottom line is that if you're at a funeral and you're thinking, I wish we would have done something, what could we have done? Then there's a possibility that the right group can be put together and you can walk in and motivate that person to be able to try it for the group, if not for themselves, and see how they come out with it. We can't cure them, we can't make them, but you know, the statistics are very good. About 80%, 85% go into treatment upon completion of an intervention, whether it's my style or someone else's. There's a lot of good interventionists out there. And the other is, treatment normally doesn't fail you. Normally it doesn't. It's presented in different ways, different places. Folks, there's continuum of care. You know, I just had laser surgery, cataract surgery, so everything's really bright for me right now.
Me too.
But, you know, there's a continuum of care I have to follow. You know, eye drops and things of that nature, being careful here, careful there. And so it's based off of accountability, responsibility, and finding, hopefully, some faith in life that you can go to when you're in fear and not knowing what's going to happen, that you have something you can depend on and then hopefully live by some spiritual principles in life.
Thank you so much for that. Wow, cataract surgery. Oh, you've all three had it. All right, the cataract group. They can see you much better. Anyway, thank you so much for that, Ed. And also, you have written 3 best-selling books. The first one is Heart to Heart, and then Crisis Intervention. And this one today that I couldn't put down, it's called, he just wrote this, it's called The Uninvited Guest, and it's absolutely incredible. It's a real page-turner, and it's for sale on Amazon. And if they buy it, they can maybe send it to you and you'll autograph it. Yeah, you would. Okay. Anyway, so you've talked about the spiritual awakening, your faith, not being able to get through this without God. Because I could only imagine here you're on a Sunday, which is out of your office hours at the hospital. You're knocking on a door. You have no idea what to expect inside. And that you speak to her for 45 minutes and she decides to go into treatment. That is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it really is. So you've shared a bit about this, but how does substance use and all these things, trafficking, play into victimization and also in intervention?
Well, it's a good point. I mean, I think too that, you know, one lady said to her son years ago, she said something like, because he wasn't going into treatment, and she said, you know, Jamie, maybe you have 5 more years doing this. Maybe you have 15 more years doing this. But I don't have 5 more minutes of being victimized by this. I am exhausted. I don't think it's right. I should have to lock my bedroom door when I go to bed at night. I don't think it's right that I have to hide my valuables because your friends are coming over. So I don't want to live like that. And as Bill alluded to, there is a time that sometimes you stand up, or many times you stand up for you. That if you're going to carry this illness this way, you've been given a moment in your life to alter your path. And if you're not going to do it, I'm going to alter my path. So a statement, and Bill talked about, is that I'm going to get help for me. I'm going to learn about this illness. Your grandfather had it. Your grandmother had, we think she also was alcoholic or drug dependent. So I'm going to look at me, because I'm going to nip that in the bud in the sense of how far this is going to stay in this family. So if you're not going into treatment, then you're going to have to find X, Y, Z, or whatever. And so many interventions do not go to that you're going to have to do this or that, a leverage. Many don't. It just doesn't go that way. Many are presented on the norm, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe 1 hour, and it's over. The person is packing to go to treatment. And I absolutely believe that the artistry of intervening is finding the right solution. That's the key. Because, I mean, with this day and age, with insurances, finances, everything that we work with, you have to have that right treatment program, whatever it's going to be. So that has to be available day one. And I know that you know of the House of Hope.
Yes.
And the wonderful work in San Pedro that they do. In fact, their 70th anniversary is coming up October the 12th. And it's for women that have been going to the House of Hope and can be treated there. Some stay 60 days, 90 days, 1 year, 5 years, and it's an amazing program. There's one in Costa Mesa, New Directions for Women. And I mean, so these are out there, but these centers, we have to know when you go into intervening where that person's going to go, because you just don't intervene thinking, well, now we'll figure it out. It has to be done right then and there.
Ed, you're so humble, but I do know that you have been internationally acclaimed as an interventionist. You've talked to kings, don't mention any names, but you've gone all over the world. And also you've trained other people to be interventionists. So thank you so much, because I know you were the first person who started these interventions. So thank you a million times. And as we said too, all three of them are available for further education. There's so much to know and so much to learn, but as you can see, they're so accessible. They've all had cataract surgery, so they can see you really well. So anyway, and they're all healthy, and as I said, they're all legends with 150 years of service and dedication. So, thank you so much to the Nixon Library today for this incredible symposium. I hope that you've learned something, and really briefly, we need some takeaways, just some very, very, very brief takeaways. So Ed, in the few remaining minutes we have, what can people expect after an intervention? That would be the takeaway. What can they expect after an intervention?
Well, after an intervention, my hope would be is that people would leave with the feeling spiritually that there was a purpose for all their time and energy to catapult someone for a rebirth in life. That would be something I'd be after. Number two, I have said to people, when you leave your living room or wherever we had the intervention, hopefully you'll always remember there's something sacred about being in this room, because there was that rebirth. And for all that were involved in the intervention, hopefully you take away not only being proud of what you did, but you now understand that when you have butterflies of fear flying around, they'll fly in formation, and you'll have the courage to do what you want for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Jim, a takeaway from you. How can we, sitting here today, reduce child prostitution and human trafficking? What can we do to get involved?
I think the most important thing is if there's a website for Children Tonight, and get on there and you can see exactly what she's been doing all these years. And she has people on that program who are very significant in donating money, there's much more to that than gaining money. She writes grants, and I just think if you decide you want to volunteer, there's all kinds of positions available. I think it's important too to increase your awareness. When you drive down the street and you see something that seems odd, or you see two or three ladies on this, you have to become more observant. You can't just ignore things and say, I don't want to deal with that. And there's a lot of people out there too that don't seem to have a lot of heart. And so, well, they're just whores, they're prostitutes. But unfortunately, the reality of the situation is that I would say that 95 to 100%, even the older women that are out there come from families where there was an addiction, where there was child abuse. We have to become more understanding and not so judgmental.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jim, for the takeaway. So, Bill, in enablism, what can this wonderful group take away about really breaking this cycle of enablism?
Well, listening to these gentlemen, it all goes together. The more aware you become as an individual, and the sooner you act rather than sit back and say it'll get better by itself, it tends to only get worse. And eventually, they do end up having to get the help from an organization that Jim was involved in. Sometimes they have to do an intervention. Oftentimes that's a last resort, and it is a eulogy. But it started very early, and the sooner you act, the more educated you become, the more help is available because you are involved. So don't wait until you become caring to control and trying to fix it and solve it and all those things. Go get the education and the help now. There's plenty of it available. Don't wait another day. Whether it's nipped in the bud early or has gone on for a long time, it's never too late to get the help.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we have had so much education and information in these fields of substance use, of human trafficking, enablism, but it's time now, all three of them said, it's time for us to act now. Now. It's really time for us to combat what's going on and to act now. And I know that we can do this, we can. So let's change these statistics into survivors and solutions, and these victims also into survivors. So thank you so much for being here today. God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We will now take a break and be back in 15 minutes for our keynote speech.
Oh, so do we have any time for questions? Just maybe one or two questions. Yes, question. How many minutes do we have for questions? 1 minute.
We have 1 minute. One question right over here.
But they can be contacted, so you have your phone numbers.
Okay. Okay. You gave us a lot of statistics in this handout, one of which was that only 23% get treatment, and I asked you if you would make sure to tell that a lot of people are recidivism. But the statistic that makes a lot of sense, and I hope you'll address it from all three of you, youth substance usage has gone down or remained flat. What do you attribute this to? Are there programs in the schools, or why are we seeing this good news in these statistics?
So substances use has decreased, and what would be your thoughts on that, why it's decreased? Has there been more information, education, parent involvement? What do you think?
Well, being on the front lines, I might have to ask where that percentages came from. But I mean, was it researched out of? A lot of times they don't tell the truth. They minimize, their parents say, not my child, those kind of things. So I would be a little leery of that. I think the legalization of marijuana, looking the other way, it's okay, makes it seem flat. I don't know, you know, I'm a frontliner and I sure don't see it. I see a lot of young people need help, and their parents need help as well.
All right, with that, we're going to take a short little break and be back here at noon.
And they're available too during the break. If you want to come up and talk to them or ask them questions, they're completely accessible. So anyway, thank you so much, and God bless all of you. Great job.
Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin in 2 minutes. Please take your seats.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to take your seats, please? We are going to move on to our keynote address here. So please make your way to your chairs. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. My name is Chris Nordyke, and I have the privilege of serving as the Richard Nixon Foundation's Vice President of External Affairs. We are going to be serving lunch in just a little bit. It'll be in that hallway, and it'll be box lunches. And after we hear from our keynote speaker, you all are welcome to make your way out there, grab lunch, come back here, and enjoy it. But I now have the distinct honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Sheriff Don Barnes. He has dedicated nearly 40 years of law enforcement service to the people of Orange County. He joined the Orange County Sheriff's Department in 1989, and over the course of his career, he has held every leadership rank in the department: Deputy, Sergeant, Lieutenant, Chief of Police Services, Executive Assistant to the Sheriff, Division Commander, Assistant Sheriff, Under Sheriff, and of course, Sheriff of Orange County. He's testified before Congress, and he's made multiple visits to the White House. And as our sheriff, he leads approximately 4,000 sworn and professional staff committed to serving the community and providing public safety services for nearly 1 million residents. He manages 6 commands of the Orange County Sheriff's Department, which of course includes operating one of the nation's largest jail systems. He's done it all, and his broad experience, approachability, and professionalism make him one of the most respected and appreciated leaders in the history of Orange County's law enforcement. He's a valued supporter of the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum. He's a treasured partner of the Richard Nixon Foundation, and someone that I consider a friend and bar-setting example. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in welcoming Sheriff Don Barnes.
It is still morning. Good morning. That was a kind introduction. The 40 years just really resonated with me. I think that I have this time-lapse photo of my hair just going progressively grayer over time. I love the Richard Nixon Library. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I've been here for numerous events over the years, and I just really think that this is a model presidential library, and the staff here are phenomenal. Today I'm going to share a couple of things specifically about President Nixon and his successes in getting into the arena of dealing with addiction and drug and narcotics, and also talk about some of the ways we're dealing with those same things today in Orange County 50 years later, and some of the opportunities and threats we're still facing in the arena of narcotics. This is what I love about what President Nixon has accomplished over time. He's very innovative and almost omniscient in how we have seen this progression over time. When he first, in his presidency, said he's going to start a strategy to deal with the nation's addiction crisis and also the drug trafficking trends that we were seeing impacting our country. And I can tell you that what they were dealing with back then in the early 70s when he made these initial efforts are nothing compared to what we're dealing with today in narcotics trafficking. The one thing that is interesting, and I hate this term because I always hear the war on drugs, and people are advocates for legalization of drugs or advocates in some area use that term war on drugs. Richard Nixon never said that. He said that we should have an all-out offense against drugs, which he called public enemy number one. And I'm offended by the war on drugs term because it isn't a war on drug. Enforcing our nation's laws against drugs, drug trafficking, and other issues is not a war. Wars are finite. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so to say that the war on drugs has failed, it's never been a war. It's simply been a strategy to hopefully address, curb, and mitigate the risks of narcotics that we've been experiencing over time that are manifested now today, 50 years later, in totally different ways. And I can tell you that over the time, we didn't get better. We got much worse and a lot less safe. One of the initial strategies focused on supply and demand, and I love that quote because if you've heard me speak, and I speak a lot, so you may have heard talk about narcotics trends and what we're experiencing. And there's a narcotics economy that exists, supply chain issues. You look at the things that are happening. When Chris Nordike said I was invited back to the White House, I met with the Office of National Drug Control Policy, one of 3 people nationally invited to speak specifically on fentanyl, which of course has emerged into one of our nation's greatest health crises. And I talked about all the issues that lead to fentanyl, the Chinese production of the precursors, transiting those through the United States into the ports in Mexico, the clandestine pill production, pill presses being sold to the cartels violence, the issues at the border, all these things. And I ended with one simple thing. I said, you can deal with all of the issues, but until you deal with the demand north of the border, until we deal with our nation's addicts and addiction crisis, there'll always be somebody who will be willing to step up, stand up, and meet that demand. You can take all the El Menchos and all the El Chapos out, but somebody will always fill that gap because of our nation's incessant need on narcotics, illicit narcotics. What Nixon said, I think, was best, and I'm going to quote him. Nixon perceived an attack on the supply of narcotics rather ineffective if the demand side received little to no attention. He firmly believed that no matter how hard the country pushed against the supply of narcotics, demand for these substances would remain and find its way into American lives. It sounds like Nostradamus when he's made that statement, and that statement is completely true today. And it's landmark legislation and policy changes that President Nixon put in place back then, the comprehensive drug abuse and prevention and control scheduling, and still today, the Narcotics Scheduling Controlled Substances Act. By the way, that has not been updated for decades. It is almost irrelevant in some ways how that scheduling has changed, because as precursor chemicals or one little molecule changes, it falls out of the Controlled Substances Act for enforcement. It's very difficult for us to hold people accountable for trafficking narcotics. He also had some very innovative things that he did back in the day. The comprehensive drug abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970, the appointment of the first director of the Drug Enforcement Agency, which is still in existence today. They do phenomenal work. The Drug Abuse Office of Treatment Act in 1972, and also the Narcotic Addict Treatment Act of 1974. All these things were progressing towards dealing with the wide range of issues that we were facing as a country in that time. Unfortunately, the decades since then have not made us any better. We departed from the comprehensive approach, instead tried a series of unbalanced policies, and I think California, unfortunately, is failing miserably in that regard. The last decade, we've seen decisions to decriminalize accountability, actually in some ways even protecting the cartels and the drug traffickers through failed legislation that has made this very, very difficult for us. In 2014, we had Proposition 47 passed. Now, you may not remember Prop 47 by the number, you've heard it talked about ever since, but the ballot title of Prop 47 was the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. Who would not sign or vote for safer neighborhoods and safer schools? Everybody would. I think it was intentionally labeled that way because it did nothing to make our schools or neighborhoods safer. What it did was decriminalize or reduce in accountability a lot of the nation's, the two things that most law enforcement agencies deal with more than anything else is drug crimes and property crimes. It made the majority of narcotics crimes and property crimes no longer felonies, made them misdemeanors. If you don't know how the criminal justice system works, you cannot go to prison for a misdemeanor. It was a depopulation effort of our state prison system, but it also eliminated all the accountability measures that we had in helping people get into sobriety. Prior to Prop 47, you had to try really, really hard to actually get committed to jail for a possession charge. In fact, 80% of those charged and convicted of felonies for possession served their time in my jail. They didn't go to state prison. So we had the original Prop 36, we have PC 1000, drug courts, all these off-ramping opportunities to get people into services, hopefully into sobriety, with the ultimate goal of, guess what, them never coming back to jail. That's the end goal. That carrot approach is no longer there. So after Prop 47 passed, somebody caught with a narcotic that used to be a felony, now we write them a ticket, say, please show up in court in 30 days. Most of them never showed up in court, and we had this revolving door of these minor infractions that were taking place. Simply put, there's nothing to encourage people into saving themselves from their criminal behavior for addiction. It also had an impact on homelessness. There's a direct correlation between drug abuse and mental illness, unfortunately, that have manifested into the homeless crisis that we're experiencing in California. I've preached on this many times. In my experience, people do not become homeless and become addicted to drugs. People do not become homeless and then become mentally unstable. It's one or both of those other things, oftentimes co-occurring, that will end with them becoming homeless. In 2008, when we had the recession, we had a brief spur of economically homeless people who were losing their homes, but they were the most motivated to get back into housing in some way. We don't really have that experience anymore. And then we saw the impact of homeless deaths in our county. A few years ago, I started a homeless death review committee that looks into the causal factors of people dying while on our streets. And not surprisingly, we saw this rise over time. We had 104 people die who were unhoused in 2014, and in 2023 at 508. That's a very significant, almost five-fold increase over that time. Over half of those are due to narcotics, and the causal factor for the rise the last 3 years is directly related to fentanyl. There's a direct correlation of those people dying from the fentanyl crisis. And then we started recognizing the demands that the cartels are rising up. The cartels today, they're a Fortune 100 company. They're like Amazon. They're very sophisticated. They're not the cartels from the 80s, and they have this. They leave a wake of just destruction and lives lost. They have a blatant disregard for American lives. They do not care. Anybody dies from a drug, it's just a lost leader in their market, and they will backfill them with another addict before time. The lack of border security was also a big issue. This is not a political statement. This is just the fact. The last 4 years of the last administration opened our borders up. They presented it as a humanitarian crisis, but the cartels took full advantage of that. When they were flooding kids to the border, that was a cartel strategy to turn CBP into babysitters because they had to watch them. And when they did that, they do end arounds where the gaps exist on the border and drive narcotics straight into our community. Our facility, our organization, the Orange County Sheriff's Department, over that time, in 2021, seized 100 pounds plus of pure fentanyl powder. And the same period, they seized, in 2024, over 200 pounds, so doubled that amount. I have aggregated numbers in a minute. And went from over 16,000 pills in 2021 to over 2 million clandestine produced fentanyl pills in that same period. And if you are unfamiliar with the pill production issue with the cartels, and it bothers me when either other politicians or the media says it was a pill laced with fentanyl. It was not a pill laced with fentanyl. There's no other pharmaceutical quality in that pill other than fentanyl. It is 100% only fentanyl, a binding agent, coloring and pressing to look like a Xanax, an OxyContin, and oxycodone. In fact, the DEA 2 years ago said that over 99% of the pills sold on the street today are not pharmaceutical, they are fentanyl. Let's just round that off to 100%. If I have any one message to take from this, my speaking to you today, it is this: if you have children, neighbors, kids, grandkids, whoever it might be, if it is not prescribed by a doctor, issued by a pharmacy, it is 100% going to be fentanyl. And you're playing Russian roulette with that pill when you take it. That is the one life's lesson I think we can take. A few years ago, we actually surpassed 100,000 people in our country who lost their lives to some drug-related trend or crime. 2/3 of those lives lost were directly related to fentanyl-related deaths. Some people call them fentanyl poisoning. It is not a poisoning. Poisoning in criminal statute is a specific intent crime. I use the term fentanyl-related death because that is how I can categorize it. It's not an overdose, because an overdose is somebody takes too much of a pharmaceutical product that takes too much, like an OxyContin. So it is a fentanyl-related death. The biggest issue with these changes is the drug, how easy it is to produce fentanyl. It's a synthetic. It's not heroin, which is grown from the opium poppy. There's no seasonal grow patterns. You just have these chemicals. You produce fentanyl, and that you get from China and also from the Middle East, and you can produce fentanyl powder. On the left side, you see two graphics. The graphic on the left is the overdose and surge in overdose deaths, or death related from fentanyl over time, over that period. To put this in perspective, in 2014, nationally, 4% of our drug-related deaths were directly related to fentanyl as a causal factor. 5 years later, in 2018, it was 40%, tenfold increase. Now it's 73% to 75%, 3 out of 4 people. We saw this coming. We saw this coming for a decade, and we failed to respond to it and gave the cartels the foothold that they now have. And worse, yes, the distribution strategies changed. We use the term drug hub, like Grubhub. When you call Grubhub and have something delivered, a meal delivered to your front door, Drug Hub does the same thing. Kids delivering pills to their friends or through a network, we're delivering fentanyl pills that look like Xanax, OxyContin, but they are not. They're fentanyl. I'm also the county coroner. If you didn't know, that's a dual office, and because I'm the coroner of access to information, we have seen fentanyl-related deaths that are 36 times the lethal level of fentanyl in the system. Literally taking a pill, hitting your bloodstream, and flatlining you. And there's not enough naloxone, which is an fentanyl or opiate antagonist. There's not enough naloxone strong enough to block that level of lethality of fentanyl in the bloodstream. I talked about seizures. This is what we've seen over time for the same period. Almost a ton, 1,550 pounds of fentanyl powder, and over 3 million clandestine produced fentanyl pills. That's just the Orange County Sheriff's Department. Regionally, that number is staggering, what we've seen. What drives me crazy about some of these things is legislation that we've had, that we proposed from the Sheriff's Department, having the state legislators just blatant disregard for the facts and saying that is not happening here, which is staggering. In 2021, we started issuing admonishments to people arrested for selling or trafficking narcotics. And an admonishment is called a Watson admonishment, which is for DUI. When somebody gets arrested for DUI, you say, you've been arrested for DUI. If you drive intoxicated again and kill or injure somebody, if you kill somebody, you can be charged for second-degree murder. Do you understand? Yes, and you sign that form, it goes into the filing packet. We took the initiative of starting to do the same thing with individuals who were selling and trafficking narcotics. We'd read them an admonishment, and they would acknowledge it, and if they sold a pill or something to somebody that resulted in a death, we could then charge them for secondary murder. Some of the courts rejected it, but in 2024, because of Prop 36, that is now codified in the law. Anybody arrested for those violations now are read an admonishment. If they sell something later that results in the death of a person, they can be charged for secondary murder. We've actually charged people federally, had cases adopted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and had people prosecuted for that over time. And what we also changed is with the shift in what used to be overdose deaths or something that might be somebody using too much of a narcotic, now our homicide investigators respond and look at every one of these deaths as a potential homicide, trying to identify who the dealer was that sold them that pill so we can go back after them for selling something that resulted in the death of another person. We had tremendous success in that. One case in federal court resulted in the sentencing of somebody for 15 years for selling a pill or a substance to another person. And despite all of those things, we now have enhanced penalties for fentanyl trafficking. This was the bill I proposed for years and was always rejected in California State Assembly or the State Senate. That is now codified into law because of Prop 36, enhanced penalties for trafficking, not possession. That was the biggest issue. We had senators like Scott Wiener would say we're going after addicts. No, we're not. We're going after people selling them the narcotics. Now it's codified in the law. And we also have an education effort. And I've shared this with DEA, FBI, DHS, and ONDCP, the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Several years ago, we created a program. It's fact-based. If you don't know this, and some of you may remember the old Scared Straight programs we had and that old commercial, this is your brain on drugs with a frying egg, that did nothing to dissuade kids. It actually didn't, scaring them didn't work. In many cases, those drug programs back in the day educated kids about narcotics and exposed them to it for the first time. And we lied to our kids over time because we said, Don, you use drugs, you're gonna die. And Don goes out and tries something, and it doesn't kill me, and it actually makes me feel better because that's how addiction works. It starts with that first endorphin release and the dopamine that enters your system. Like, I feel better, I didn't die, you've been lying to me, Mom and Dad, I'm gonna keep doing it. And anybody who's dealt with addiction knows, I think we had a panel on addiction here earlier, it's a progression of use that leads to the addiction. If you talk to any addict, and they will tell you, I'm not trying to get high anymore, I'm trying to get back to normal. Homeostasis is so out of balance, they're trying to get back to feeling normal, not to get that high anymore. And we also started curing, by the way, that program is in 50 schools now. It's a life lessons program, teaches them to deal with stressors, with suicidal ideations. We're honest with this is what's going to do to your system. And it's a 6-week program. By the 3rd week, it ends with, what did you learn? And every kid will say, 5th and 6th grade students, just don't start using drugs in the first place, right? That's the goal. We're starting to break that cycle. Over 3,000 students got that last week. We're in 50 different schools now, and I want that to be a model program for the nation. I think this should be replicated across our country. And knowing in 2014, when the Orange County Crime Lab, which I manage, internationally accredited crime lab, saw the first presence of fentanyl west of the Mississippi, we knew that we were going to recognize a trend and got out ahead of it. And since 2015, we've been carrying naloxone deployed, every deputy deployed in the streets, in the jails, all of our crime lab personnel and our coroner death investigators carry naloxone with them. I carry it with me in my car. I do not want to be that person ill-prepared if I'm present when something happens. And we have since saved over 700 lives with our naloxone policy and strategy over time. It's becoming much more difficult. I don't know what the panel covered previously, but now we're seeing the presence of xylazine mixed with fentanyl. Xylazine is to make that happen. Last year, I said Prop 36 passed in November. 7 out of every 10 Californians voted for Prop 36. It passed in every county of the state, overwhelmingly. You would think that would send a message to our governor. He hasn't funded one nickel for Prop 36. And I don't mind calling him out on that because he wants to see it fail. In his wanting to see it fail, he's also saying, I want to see California lives be lost. I want to see families impacted. I want to make that difficult call to a family, so your son or daughter's not coming home. That's the end result of the lack of failure. And I think that we need to hold them to that. We can't solve this problem without the second half of what we do in getting people into sobriety or into mental health stability. If you don't know this, I know we had a panel. I run the largest mental health facility in the county. I run the largest drug treatment center in the county. I run the largest detox unit in the county. It's called the Orange County Jail. Half the people entrusted to my care, notice I said people, not inmates. Half the people entrusted to my care have a daily nexus of mental health treatment. That's 1 out of 2 of the 4,200 people I have incarcerated. I have at any given moment about 1,000 people on medication-assisted treatment, a tremendous taxpayer cost to invest in these people to get them into sobriety. I have 200 people every day in medically supervised step-down units to detox them off of alcohol and or drugs every single day. I've advocated for years with Congress and other leaders to fund and invest in programs upstream before these people decline into a law enforcement contact that enters them in the criminal justice system. If we invest that money wiser, all the downstream effects don't happen. There's a number that still holds true. Every dollar we invest in preventative measures saves $7 in incarceration costs. We have to invest in these people and get them in. I believe if we do that well, I can decrease the populace of my jail by at least 25%. People never coming to see me. And by the way, that's not a fun business to be in. We see families getting torn apart. And then we have the marijuana crisis. The decriminalization of marijuana, or the standardization, I should say, of marijuana as being like alcohol, just something is a false narrative. I go back to when I grew up, the Cheech and Chong era, if you remember that, the big submarine sandwich joint, and they made fun of. The level of THC in marijuana today is staggering. And it's this false narrative that it's the panacea, it solves every social and medical problem. It actually does the opposite. In the adolescent developing brain, which is up to 25 years, it's actually causing psychosis at alarming rates. It actually is now attributed and correlated with paranoid schizophrenia, over 300% increase in people who smoke marijuana developing schizophrenia as a result of their use. We need to look at marijuana differently. It's not just a social cocktail. It's having staggering impacts on our society. So all those to say, this is where we are today. We are trying our best. I look at every dollar we invest as a dollar that I don't have available to spend somewhere else. Community collaboration is an imperative. I've spoken on podcasts and other things to make people aware of the things that we're dealing with. We have to turn this corner and get out ahead of it. I'll go back to what I started with, and we can't do any of that until we get people into sobriety. We have to prevent adding new addicts, which we're doing with our drug education program, and we have to go upstream and prevent people from declining into addiction, and that's how you beat the cartels. If you're just going one in, one out, you'll never win. We have to get people into sobriety, out of addiction, and kill the demand that happens in this Fed by south of the border. And that's the only way we'll be able to resolve this. In '68, Richard Nixon said in his drug policy speech, the progress on drug epidemic depends on action by everybody. You have to be co-producers of your own safety. And I think that one thing we have declined even beyond the drug issue is, and this may sound personal, is our separation and focus on our families. These things are raising our kids, not parents, and parents are oftentimes reading it at the same time. And quite honestly, I think it's the unfortunate reality that we've separated ourselves from our religions and our faith. Those two things are going to save our country, I believe, at getting connected with either our faith, if you have it. I'm not saying you have to, but there are principles, values, virtues associated with faith, whatever it is, and focusing on our family and our kids and making sure they know that they're loved, supported, and corrected when necessary. If we don't do those things, we are most definitely going to continue down this road of losing our country. Thank you for the opportunity. Enjoy your lunch. Thank you to the Nixon Library for allowing me to speak to you.
Sheriff Barnes, thank you for the incredible education and the incredible work that you and your deputies do. You're always welcome at the Nixon Presidential Library. thank you for doing today's keynote.
Thank you.
Lunch is now available in the hallway. Please grab a bite. I'll come and join you shortly.